Supporters call it the most important housing legislation in decades. But what does the new housing bill mean for everyday Texans? That story and more today on the Texas Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm David Brown. That new housing bill becomes law despite the president's refusal to sign it. Today, a deeper dive into what it actually does. In Texas's closely watched U.S. Senate race, a challenge to what's become conventional wisdom about the Democratic nominee and his appeal to Texas's black voters. An apparent end to the ceasefire with Iran and where that leaves consumers in Texas. Plus, they look like ATM machines, but critics say Texas is behind the curve on banning them, why cryptocurrency kiosks are getting a cold, hard look. That and more coming up today on the Texas Standard. No matter where you are, it's Texas Standard Time on this 13th day of July, 2026. I'm David Brown. Great to have you with us. Hey, anyone in the market for a home? Texas is technically a buyer's market right now. There's more inventory. Sellers are negotiating. Prices have come off their peaks in many places, yet many first-time buyers still say home ownership feels as far away as ever. High mortgage rates mean with more homes on the market, the monthly payment on a typical house remains a major hurdle. In other words, the market may be friendlier, but that doesn't necessarily mean affordable. For years now, Americans have told pollsters that the cost of buying or renting a home is one of their biggest economic concerns. That frustration has cut across party lines, too, making housing one of the rare issues where Republicans and Democrats have found enough common ground to pass major legislation, which has just become law. Though President Trump refused to sign the bipartisan Road to Housing Act after Congress refused to take up a separate election bill he wanted, many experts describe this new law as the most significant federal housing legislation in decades, making it easier to build homes, reducing some construction costs, expanding access to financing, and placing new limits on large institutional investors buying up single-family homes. Whether those changes are enough, or whether Texans will notice them anytime soon, well, that's another thing altogether, and something we hope to explore now with Stephen Sherman. He's the Associate Director of Research with the Center for Housing and Neighborhoods at Rice's Kinder Institute for Urban Research. Professor, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is being called the biggest federal housing bill in decades. If you could think of two or three of the biggest changes folks should understand, what would they be?
I'd say that the first statement is very true. This is probably the biggest housing bill in decades. However, there's a bunch of small changes, so it's really hard to distill this act into one sentence. What you do find are a bunch of measures mostly targeting housing supply. For example, there's measures making small dollar mortgages easier. That's more of a finance issue. There's measures streamlining the construction of mobile and manufactured housing.
Mm-hmm.
There are measures to encourage municipalities to find vacant land for development. So most of these measures target building supply. What you don't find targeted, I think, is sort of this core issue about housing affordability, which is not really necessarily the cost of rent or a new home, which the past 2 years has actually remained pretty stable.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fact that people don't have enough money in their pockets to pay for housing. And that's more than just a housing affordability issue. That's a cost of living issue.
Domains. Texas, of course, has one of the nation's fastest growing populations, and recent reports show housing prices dropping from record highs. Talk about the lack of affordability right now. Housing prices, I think for a lot of people, they just decided they were not going to try to buy ever. They didn't see a path to get there. So does this new law do anything to help with that disconnect? You talk about basically this being a cost of living issue. Is it conceivable that more housing could perhaps bring home ownership within reach of any Texans?
So I think that the effects for that, shall they come, will be a few years down the road, right? There's a crisis now, but the effects for this, I think, are not going to be immediate. And I think even the law's strongest boosters would agree with me on that point. There are some common sense things that I think are a good idea. A thing that's gotten the most news in this law has been the measures restricting build to rent and targeting large institutional investors who are buying single-family homes to rent. A lot has also been said that that's not really a big share of the housing market. About 2% of single-family rentals are represented by these large companies. In the final version of the law, there is no outright ban on build to rent or on private equity owning homes or in large corporate institutional investors. But there are measures to have these companies. I think this is a really good thing, and this goes back to your original question. There are measures to encourage companies to report rental payments to credit bureaus. Because one of the realities is, as I say this as a renter, your mortgage payment goes to your credit score. Your rental payment doesn't. I've been a renter now for 22 years. I've never missed rent. I've never been, thankfully, never been in a position where I need to delay payments a month. But that doesn't matter squat for my credit score. And I think that measures like this, and that's most people, frankly.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I think measures like this are pretty commonsensical and I think are a good thing. Same with the small dollar mortgage issue. Small dollar mortgage, what that is so if you want to buy a house for like $100,000 or less, $150,000 or less,
right.
$200,000, a lot of banks won't lend to you.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly in poor parts of the United States, poor neighborhoods or big cities or in rural areas. That's a lot of housing stock.
Yeah. If there were to be a change, as you're describing, you get credit for at least recognition for what you've been doing as a renter, and that could go to improve your prospects. That's what you're saying.
Correct. And I think the small dollar mortgage, too, will allow people, because if you can't get lent, that means you just have to buy it outright with cash. And $100,000 is a lot for anyone.
Right.
So that as well, I think, could be meaningful.
I'm curious, you're based in Houston. Has there been any experience there with housing policy that might be able to help other growing metropolitan areas adapting to this new law, or not so much?
So this is the other interesting part. Houston famously has no zoning. With that said, and we've added in the region a lot of new housing, but we still have our own marked and very severe affordability concerns. Majority of renters in Houston and Harris County are now cost burdened. It's about the same ratio as New York City, which is a famously expensive city with a lot of renters.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not out of the unaffordability woods. But there are measures in this law that I think encourage cities to maybe be slightly more Houston-like, not necessarily abandoning zoning altogether, but liberalizing the zoning codes so that things like accessory dwelling units, granny flats, backyard pool houses can be done more easily, so that cities can reduce the minimum lot size to have more homes on smaller lots. But at the end of the day, those are still cities' decisions, right? And I don't think you're going to find a mass of suburban areas that are already built out, particularly in the older metro areas in the Northeast and the Midwest. I don't think you're going to find those places suddenly decide that they want to bring in high-density housing, because that's up to each individual municipality. And Lord knows they'll protest in a lot of cases.
Obviously, it's about setting realistic expectations in the wake of passage of this bill. We're going to have more on it over at texasstandard.org. Stephen Sherman is the Associate Director of Research with the Center for Housing and Neighborhoods at Rice's Kinder Institute for Urban Research. Professor, thanks so much for talking with us on The Standard.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now let's turn our attention to Texas's closely watched U.S. Senate race. Ever since State Representative James Talarico won the Democrats' nomination, there have been questions about if he could win over black Democrats by November. Back in the primaries, his opponent, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, received overwhelming support from the state's black voters. But as the Texas newsroom's Blaze Gainey reports, new polling suggests Talarico's doing better with black voters than current public perception might suggest.
At the Texas Democrats Convention in Corpus Christi, there was standing room only for James Talarico's speech to the party's Black Caucus.
We're going to be respectful.
While he was introduced this way,
y'all might have some feelings about it, right?
The candidate still received a warm welcome.
We're going to bring in the next senator from the state of Texas, Mr. James Talarico.
Those cheers clash with a narrative that's followed the Democratic nominee for months, that he could struggle to win over black voters. But new polling from the Texas Politics Project shows right now Talarico's actually in a stronger position with black voters than previous Democratic U.S. Senate nominees. So why doesn't the conventional wisdom line up with the numbers? Joshua Blank is the poll's author.
The main advantage that Talarico has in this race with black voters and with Democratic voters in general is that he's just significantly more well-known at this point in the race than were either O'Rourke in 2018, MJ Hager in 2020, or Colin Allred in 2024.
Blank says Democratic candidates in Texas often spend much of the campaign simply introducing themselves to voters, but Talarico was already relatively well known, though not as high profile as his primary opponent, Jasmine Crockett. But support in the poll does not equal enthusiasm, something I heard from Margaret and Monica Thompson after Talarico's speech to the Black Caucus.
When history has turned the page, we have to go with the next page. So it was very hard, but I did turn the page. And so in order to win, we have to go with whoever the people's choice has chosen.
I'll probably support him because we do want him to be Ken Paxton, but I don't like the way he got it. I just don't think Jasmine Crockett got a fair chance because of her skin color.
Voters like them could become especially important to the U.S. Senate race. Michael Adams is a political scientist at Texas Southern University.
If we have an election that's a statistical dead heat, those voters who may opt to stay at home would be very important. And Jasmine Crockett was able to get them off of their sofas and out to the polls.
It's a challenge Talarico acknowledged in Corpus Christi.
There is no way to win this race without Black Texans.
Joshua Blank says that's because the conversation boils down to maintaining enthusiasm within the Democratic coalition, something he says naturally grows.
In all of that polling that we've looked at over many election cycles, the share of black voters who support the Democratic candidate tends to go up the closer we get to Election Day.
The dynamic exists in both parties, in general, and even on the Republican side of Texas' U.S. Senate race, where nominee Ken Paxton faced his own share of criticism from voters who supported incumbent John Cornyn. But Gary Carey, president of the Collin County Conservative Republicans, says most Cornyn supporters are now on board.
A lot of them are very disappointed. I think a lot of them are quickly coming around to recognizing that now Ken Paxton is a clear and important choice.
So while Republican and Democratic voters may not always be enthusiastic about their party's nominee at first, by Election Day, many ultimately rally behind the candidate, or at the very least, hold their nose and vote for him. I'm Blaze Gainey in Austin.
Coming up, amid the current World Cup fever, we'll meet the Texan who has a goal of his own: foster deeper interest in the beautiful game. How he's hoping to do that and a whole lot more as the Texas Standard continues. Texas Standard Time Check coming up on 19 minutes past the hour. Stay with us.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Half Price Books, a Texas-bred new and used bookstore, proudly supporting public media and sustainability by keeping books, music, and other media in circulation. Store locations and more information at hpb.com. Support for Texas Standard comes from Barron, Adler, Clough & Odo, a Texas eminent domain and condemnation law firm, helping to protect the rights of Texas property owners for more than 40 years. More at barronadler.com.
This is the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. The small southeast Dallas County town of Wilmer has remained largely rural, but it's becoming a hot spot for data centers. City and county leaders say the arrival of 2 new facilities will ultimately benefit the community. But KERA's Pablo Arauz-Pena reports residents say they need better roads and a grocery store, not more industry.
Over a dozen residents fill the room at the Wilmer City Chambers at a meeting about all the industry moving into town. Up until recently, Wilmer and the surrounding area was one of the last undeveloped parts of Dallas County, but that's quickly changing.
So they're building this one right here, and then this one is further down, which is going to be on there. I believe they're trying to build another one here on Sunrise Road.
Newly elected City Council member Moses Garcia points to a bird's eye map of the city, which will soon be home to 2 new data centers. He says that for years, the town didn't invest much in infrastructure. But in recent years, Wilmer, population 7,000, has become a hub for shipping and logistics facilities and now data centers, drawn in by the ample space. Now Garcia says the city is at a crossroads.
we're just going to be data centers. I mean, there's no room for grocery stores. There's no room for future buildings, for homes and development, a community.
Cecil White and her husband Derek have lived in Wilmer for about a year. They moved here for the peace and quiet.
That small town feeling, that like community feeling, while still being close to, Dallas, so that we could move around.
What they don't like is they have to drive out of town to get groceries, and they don't have a city park nearby.
Here, it's just a bunch of warehouses, but nothing's really being built for the citizens.
City and county leaders say those warehouses are what bring in jobs, and then the amenities will follow. Dallas County Judge Clay Lewis Jenkins says he wants to see manufacturing move in.
Because that's how you get your grocery stores, your dry cleaners, your restaurants, because those folks have that disposable income.
Wilmer Mayor Sheila Petta has been in office throughout the industrial boom. She says the 2 new data center facilities could bring in up to $3 million in revenue for the city every year.
I've got citizens that are complaining about our streets. I agree with them 100%. But with this money that could possibly be coming into Wilmer, we can get a lot done.
She says data centers can be a good solution, and the companies are willing to help the community they're moving into. Stream Data Centers is one of the developers building a facility in the town. Chief Development Officer Oshin Marku says they've already contributed to Wilmer.
We've been focusing on what I would say is like community impact versus the infrastructure side of things with the citywide cleanup and the career day at the elementary school. We're working with the city to increase the amount of public trash and recycling cans that are available around the city as well. So we are definitely open to infrastructure investments.
He's aware of the pushback from residents, but says the company wants to engage with the city constructively.
Our only ask for everybody is like, let's sit down together and put a solution together versus feel like we're on opposite sides of the fence.
Residents like Glenda Hefner say they don't want to wait for improvements that are supposed to follow.
I'm not against those new buildings, but do what's first.
And for her, that means better infrastructure. I'm Pablo Arauz Peña in Dallas.
And you're listening to the Texas Standard. A soccer history buff in North Texas is showcasing an extensive memorabilia collection. He says the goal is to foster interest in the beautiful game amid World Cup fever. KERA's Andy Lusk stopped by the new Legends of Soccer exhibition in Frisco.
Interesting enough that you're here today because it was 60 years today. So it's the actual anniversary of when England won the World Cup. So as you can see here, we have...
Martin Kelman lives and breathes soccer.
So I just love everything about soccer. As you can tell, I just like talking about football and that's the old soccer, as we're going to call it here.
His affinity for the beautiful game stretches back to his childhood in Manchester, England.
So we go to the games and then the players were really approachable. Here's an autograph, son. And, so I started gaining autographs.
From there, Kelman's collection grew.
Well, the thing I try and focus on is programs because I think they resonate with the memory. And tickets as well because, sadly, the world's gone digital.
So when the FIFA World Cup came to Dallas, Kelman temporarily offered his memorabilia collection to the Frisco Heritage Center. The new Legends of Soccer exhibition runs through December. It's filled with hundreds of individual keepsakes.
That's where the desk's going to go. We'll move that in a minute. Yeah, that goes in there.
We're just weighting these down.
There are jerseys, posters, signed items, life-size standees of famous players, and all sorts of tokens that might be hard to find anywhere else.
Where are those pictures at the moment?
The exhibition includes tributes to international, American, and even Texan players, including a familiar name.
So you see a player by the name of Kelman. That's actually my son, Charlie. Charlie grew up here in Frisco. Amazing young man. He went professional at 17.
You heard that right. Martin Kelman is more than just a superfan. He's a proud dad to 2 young professional soccer players, Charlie and Bobby Kelman.
It's great to see them do what they love, and I think that's the key.
Martin Kelman says he came to the United States in 1995 as a veteran of the British Army to work for a Swedish telecommunications company. As he got older, he says his love of sports and soccer came back. He picked up coaching and also became a FIFA agent representing some players.
What we tried to do is welcome you to our city.
Now, with the World Cup in Dallas, Kelman is showing others the magic of the game. He wants the Legends of Soccer exhibition to be educational and accessible, especially for kids.
And that's why this is a free exhibition. I had a lot of offers from people to bring this out and show it places, but they all wanted to charge.
Objects on display are diverse in terms of where and when they're from and why they're historically significant. And Kelman's knowledge of the sport and the meaning of each item is encyclopedic.
What I'm hoping is when people have walked through this exhibition, at the end of it, they go, you know what, I know quite a bit about soccer now. I can hold my own in a bar conversation, or I know these players.
Kelman wants to see his exhibition help visiting fans reconnect with old memories of the game, start conversations about soccer amongst family members, and maybe even inspire future players.
We're trying to help people grow the game. These are your heroes. You have to look up at someone, and everyone's journey starts somewhere.
If that journey begins in the Dallas-Fort Worth region, the good news is that the Metroplex is home to multiple professional soccer clubs for men and women. And despite the U.S. men's national team losing to Belgium in the round of 16, Kelman says of American soccer,
"We're a great nation, and it's only a matter of time before we really succeed in soccer. We have all the infrastructure, but people have to believe, people have to play the game."
And now that the 2026 World Cup is moving toward its end, the United States' hosting role is almost over. But soccer fever might just stick around.
Game's been going, 150 years, and, where will it be in another 60? But, then to finish off.
I'm Andy Lusk in Frisco.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Realtors, providing representation at every stage of the home ownership journey, helping clients understand their options and manage complex transaction details. Info at texasrealestate.com. Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a Texas-based workers' compensation provider committed to providing care and support for injured employees. More at texasmutual.com/TexansDeliver.
From the Texas Newsroom, I'm Tom Perumian. A preliminary report from the National Transportation Safety Board says a jet that crashed in Laredo last month experienced the flameout of both engines before it crashed. Texas Public Radio's Jerry Clayton has more.
The crash killed Austin Tech leader Joshua Bear and injured 3 teenagers and 2 pilots. Investigators say the flight crew reported a generator failure and multiple system problems, including a low fuel level alert before attempting to land on a highway while on approach to Laredo Airport. As the airplane touched down on the highway, it sheared off several light poles, struck a vehicle, and came to rest straddling the right-hand edge of an overpass. The report also revealed that the crew of the Citation Latitude, operated by NetJets, reported unusual vibrations shortly after departing Los Cabos, Mexico, bound for Austin. Several components of the aircraft have been sent to a laboratory in Washington, D.C. for analysis. I'm Jerry Clayton in San Antonio.
Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia visited with the 3 men in ICE custody who were in the van when Lorenzo Salgado Araujo was killed. She told CNN that they continue to dispute the allegations by immigration officials.
Their story is just almost like it was a different incident that happened as opposed to what ICE said.
Garcia says they told her Salgado never tried to run anyone over. She says he was shot on his right side while ICE officers were pulling the passengers out of the van. Flash flood warnings are in place across parts of north and central Texas because of a slow-moving storm that is dumping up to 6 inches of rain. Governor Abbott has activated emergency response crews as a heavy rainfall will continue through much of this week. Atmos Energy now faces its 5th lawsuit after a gas explosion at the Oak Cliff Apartments that left 3 people dead. Eric Perez's wife and son died in the explosion. His attorney, Ted Lyon, claims Atmos failed to mark a gas line that was hit by drillers before the explosion.
They just don't know where their lines are, okay?
They have no idea where their lines are.
Atmos told KERA it hired a professional utility line locating company to find the gas pipe. The last World Cup game of the year in Texas takes place tomorrow in Arlington. Spain and France will play each other for a chance to advance to the championship. The game will be the 16th match played in Texas, the most held in any other state. I'm Tom Perumian from the Texas Newsroom.
You're listening to statewide news from public radio stations across Texas. This coverage is only possible because of support from listeners like you. You can help sustain and grow Texas news coverage by donating to your local public radio station today.
33 minutes past the hour, Texas Standard Time. I'm David Brown. Over the weekend, the conflict between the U.S. and Iran escalated once again with fresh American strikes, Iranian retaliation across the Gulf, and renewed fighting around the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important energy choke points. Oil prices jumped sharply on the news, even as Iran says it's still pursuing diplomacy through regional mediators. So what does all this add up to for global energy markets, oil supplies, and frankly, prices here at home? I know who we can ask about that. Matt Smith, lead energy analyst at Kepler. Matt, welcome back.
Thank you.
Well, another breakdown in relations between the U.S. and Iran, this increase in military attacks from both sides, and the apparent end of the ceasefire. What does all this mean in the, short term for the Strait of Hormuz traffic? And I guess we should talk more broadly about the energy markets.
Yeah, here we are, David. We are pushing on through the 5th month of the Strait of Hormuz being closed to the large part. And again, it comes with the ebb and flows in terms of the diplomacy or the escalation. And as you mentioned, we've seen this escalation over the weekend. Hence, traffic has been slowing down once again. So getting very few tankers, very few ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz here. So this is problematic. Obviously, we're not seeing oil prices reacting perhaps as crazily as we might expect, but we are seeing them pushing higher this morning here. And so as long as this continues to drag on, oil prices are going to be supported, which means prices at the pump are going to be supported as well.
When you say supported, let's just for the sake of most of our listeners who are thinking about how this translates at the pump, it means pump prices are going to be going up?
Well, yes. So we have WTI, that US benchmark, West Texas Intermediate. That dropped actually into the 60s the week before last, but now it's back up close to the mid-70s here. And so any kind of movement on that oil price, that's a key input to prices at the pump. And so that is meaning that we're seeing them holding around this kind of $3.90 level on the national average there.
What price would oil need to be to get prices at the pump on the national average down back to around, what was it, around $2.50, which was what the prices were at the time of the, back in February when the U.S. Launched these strikes?
Prices were actually much higher then. So even if we kind of consider where we were this time last year, we were about $3.15 on the national average there. Yeah. So we are that much higher now because oil prices are higher. There's some devil in the detail here as well. So, and you've had Donald Trump kind of expressing this too, in that he is accusing all companies and gasoline retailers of price gouging.
Yeah, I heard that. You think that that's true?
No. And this is why, David. So global refinery runs have dropped dramatically because they're just not getting that oil from the Strait of Hormuz, from the Middle East. So what that means is production of refined products such as gasoline, diesel, jet fuel have also dropped off big time. And so in the US here, even though US refineries have not dialed back on activity because, we're well supplied, we have US shale, we have US production. We have Canada, who is our leading supplier of oil by far, sending over 4 million barrels per day. Because the US is plentiful in refining activity and supplies, we are seeing our gasoline, our diesel, our jet being pulled out at a record pace to meet the needs on a global basis. And so that's why you're seeing elevated product prices in the US and globally.
I hate to bring this up at this juncture, but we have to acknowledge something here. Since we are now in July, this is, Atlantic hurricane season. So far, it seems like things have been rather quiet Are we expecting a quiet season, or just things haven't started firing off yet?
Knock on wood, David, we're expecting a quiet season. And so what you have is an El Nino in the Pacific. And what that means is it's less conducive for storms to form in the Atlantic. So that's a good thing. You know, NOAA is expecting a below normal hurricane season, which is 1 to 3 major hurricanes. But to your point, we also don't see hurricane season really ramping up until the second half of August here. And so we're yet ready to get underway. But that said, you know, hurricane season starts at the beginning of June. Here we are in mid-July, and we've only had one named storm, Tropical Storm Arthur, which made landfall in Galveston last month. So again, let's knock on wood, and we may have a quiet hurricane season.
Yeah, but for the time being, we should note, at least as of today, we're seeing oil prices on the rise as a result of the military action, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Just one other thing to bear in mind, while that oil price is $70, gasoline, a barrel of gasoline is $130, a barrel of diesel is $155. And so it's the pricing of the products where you're seeing the real pain in the market here, as opposed to in that oil price.
Matt Smith, lead energy analyst at Kepler. Matt, thanks so much for the update.
Thank you, David.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Monthly, producer of Where the River Took Us, a podcast about the July 4th floods from survivor Aaron Parsley's perspective, through the voices of his family and others, telling the story of grief, healing, and survival. Available on all podcast platforms.
At this time on our broadcast, we hear our segment This Week in Texas Music History. Unfortunately, we can't play it here on our podcast because of issues with music streaming rights. However, you can find it over at texasstandard.org or find a version on Texas Standard's Facebook or Instagram page. For as long as convenience stores have existed, they've carried certain staples, right? Snacks, chewing gum, motor oil. But it must be said that their offerings have evolved, too. At many Texas gas stations these days, you can also buy USB cables, charge your electric vehicle, even purchase cryptocurrency. In recent years, you might have seen these pop up at stores across the state, crypto kiosks that look a bit like ATMs. But these machines are banned in some other states because of how they can help facilitate scams. Joining us now to tell us more, Aiden Runnels, reporter for the Texas Tribune. Aiden, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Thank you so much for having me.
You know, I saw one of these crypto kiosks at a fairly reputable retailer the other day, and I sort of did a double take. Tell us a little bit more about what they look like and how they work.
Yeah, absolutely. So these crypto kiosks look a lot like your average ATM, sometimes a little shorter, sometimes a little taller, and you can go up to them and you can buy several different varieties of cryptocurrency. Usually you have to already have a crypto wallet set up. You put in your wallet address through a QR code or typing it in, insert cash, and then it will convert your cash into crypto for a fee.
Abracadabra. I was struck by a statistic in your article. Roughly 70% of people using these crypto kiosks are over the age of 60. What do you make of that?
Yeah, so that statistic comes from data from Texas's Financial Crimes Intelligence Center, and they certainly raised an alarm over that number because, you know, them and a lot of other law enforcement are very concerned that these kiosks are actually the primary conduit for fraud, specifically that targets elderly folks to sort of scare them through a variety of means into depositing, you know, tens of thousands of dollars into these machines where they're turned into cryptocurrency and whisked away and almost always unretrievable.
I was struck by some other numbers in your story. Texans grifted out of more than $58 million last year in scams involving these kiosks. That's just in Texas, $58 million in scams. That according to the FBI. Give us a sense of how a typical fraud works using a crypto kiosk.
Yeah, absolutely. So generally, these types of scams will start with a victim receiving a phone call from a number that usually is a bank or a police department or a sheriff's office, and they'll pick up the phone and somebody will tell them, you know, they're in trouble. Maybe they missed jury duty or, you know, their bank accounts have been compromised. and not to worry because there's a simple fix. They have to go down to the courthouse if they go to the bank. So after the scammer gets them up and out of their home or their office, wherever they are, they say, well, first, we actually need you to pay a fine or pay bond and redirect victims toward one of these machines after going to the bank, of course. And then from there, they encourage them or sometimes intimidate them to put tens of thousands of dollars into these machines. And it's not just these conversations too. They send fake court documents. There's a lot of variety in how they take shape, but that's sort of the general way it goes.
A couple of things stand out to me in that description, and one of them is that a lot of these scammers will already know details of your personal life, which they might have found online buried somewhere in a list that's been sold on the dark web, something like that. And so they're talking about your situation. Like, for instance, they'll say, well, I understand you moved from X county to such and such, and it sounds very legitimate. It's like, who's going to know that? So, is my understanding, too, that some other states are taking action against these kiosks. What are they doing, and is Texas behind the curve here?
Folks I talk to absolutely describe Texas as being far behind the curve. More than half the country has laid down some type of regulation. Places like California have a registry where you can, see on an official government website where each one of these are, who operates them. They have to get licenses. Several states have just outright banned them. They've decided that it's not worth the risk that they carry. But, Texas has really no regulation dedicated to these kiosks. The Department of Banking commissioner testified last month that they have no oversight over these kiosks in their current form. So, I would describe Texas as behind on this.
You see anything changing? I mean, the next year we're talking about a new legislative session, and I wonder how much this is on lawmakers' radar.
Absolutely. I would say that this is certainly something that has come onto legislators' radar. Both the House and the Senate interim charges have specific requests to legislators to look into crypto kiosks. For the House, it's through the lens of elder fraud and how to mitigate that. And they already had a hearing discussing the kiosks being what the FCIC described as the primary conduit of that fraud. And then on the Senate side, they're looking at cryptocurrency regulations writ large. And that charge actually specifically names the crypto kiosks and looking at ways to regulate them for the safety of Texans.
It's a fascinating story that Aiden Reynolds has reported for the Texas Tribune. We'll have links to more of their reporting at our website, texasstandard.org. Aiden, thanks again for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Support for Texas Standard comes from UT San Antonio, a Carnegie Tier 1 public research institution, and designated as Texas's National Institute on Aging Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. More at utsa.edu.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. For generations, if you wanted to ring the opening bell on a stock exchange, there was really only one place that mattered, New York City, of course. But Texas has long argued that as companies, jobs, and investment dollars have flowed south, the financial infrastructure should follow. Now, one of the biggest pieces of that vision is taking shape. Last week, the Texas Stock Exchange officially opened trading, albeit in a limited rollout with more products and eventually corporate listings expected later this year. So is this the beginning of a genuine challenger to Wall Street, Y'all Street as some have called it? Or is the hype running ahead of the reality? Joining us now, Bulent Temel. He is Associate Professor of Practice and Economics at the University of Texas, San Antonio. Professor, welcome back to the Texas Standard.
Thank you.
We should point out this is an all-electronic exchange. If you go to the Texas Stock Exchange headquarters, you won't find a trading floor with people shouting orders or anything like that. But we're about a week into operations now. What's your sense of how the launch has gone?
Well, it was a success in terms of operational logistics because first week was them trying to establish their systems to make sure everything operates smoothly. First 4 days entirely spent on that, and only last Friday was the only day of actual real trading. And there was no reported problems. So as far as that, it was a success. But in terms of long-term, competitive prospects of the exchange, we'll have to see. Time will show whether or not this exchange is going to be a success. The exchange hasn't published any data on the trading volume or dollar value traded or the spreads. So we'll have to see how many companies will end up getting listed, what IPOs will be offered, and what ETFs and other products will be offered, et cetera. Time will show.
Yeah. Well, right now, the TXSE is trading a small number of existing securities. No companies are actually listed on the exchange yet, we should point out. Walk us through what's going to be happening over the next several months and why those future corporate listings are the real milestone here.
So what they did at the opening last week is that they traded the 5 securities that are listed in other exchanges. It's called unlisted trading privileges. And this was a very conservative approach because the last exchange that was established that was somewhat similar to Texas Exchange was the one established in San Francisco back about 6 years ago.
Pacific Stock Exchange, I guess. Is that right?
The long-term stock exchange.
Long-term stock exchange. Okay.
Right.
All right.
And so with that exchange started listing or trading all of the companies that are listed in the U.S. markets, but Texas Exchange did only 5. And they did that on purpose, this phased approach, if you will, because it just reduces operational risk for them. And it also allows them to kind of validate their systems before handling a more bigger universe of the U.S. equities. But officials tell us that by the end of this month, they will be allowing trades on all other U.S. companies that are listed in other exchanges. It's just we'll have to see how many of those will end up getting dual listed in the Texas Exchange or how many native ones will be listed, so brand new companies that are only listed in Texas Exchange. Next year, we'll see that.
Yeah, and I guess if they decided just list on the Texas Stock Exchange, that would show a high degree of confidence in what is happening here in Texas. We should also point out, though, that the New York Stock Exchange has already launched a kind of Texas desk, I suppose you could say, NYSE Texas, and NASDAQ has expanded its presence in Dallas, and now here you have the Texas Stock Exchange entering the market. We talking about healthy competition here, or are these exchanges all chasing the same relatively small pool of business? How do you see it?
They each probably will have their own niches, and that is a very beneficial thing. For instance, many people may not know this, but the biggest exchange in terms of where most trading happens in the U.S. is not New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ. It is the Chicago Board Exchange and called CBOE, and 20% of all trades happen through them, and New York Stock Exchange is only 19%, and NASDAQ is only 15%. And they could accomplish that because they created a different niche with an entirely different priority. They didn't try to maximize the number of listed companies or IPOs or products. Instead, they focused on the technology side of trading and also futures and derivatives trading. So every time there's a switch from the conventional markets, everybody bought from them, and which boosted their volume and scale. Right now, they're the largest exchange as a result. So all these exchanges, Texas or NASDAQ, Texas, and whatever, New York Stock Exchange, will be seeking some sort of niches and they will offer what other conventional duopoly does not offer. In that sense, there may be some space for them to grow fast as a result.
Governor Abbott has declared Texas the financial capital of America, and I know that there must be some hype and hyperbole there. And certainly Texas has some momentum in finance. We've seen corporate headquarters moving to Texas in recent years. But how close is North Texas to becoming a true peer of a place like New York or London or, for that matter, San Francisco? I mean, what would have to happen before a comparison like that's truly justified, do you think?
Well, it depends on what metric we use to evaluate what makes a financial center. Because finance has so many different industries. There's the hedge fund side of it, there's investment banking, there's commercial banking, institutional banking, insurance, just an endless number of different sectors. Mm-hmm. And different cities have concentrations of these companies. For instance, Charlotte is a major banking sector.
Yeah.
Whereas insurance is big in Dallas, or stock trading in New York and what have you. So it depends on how we evaluate it. But what we can say is that finance is a significant portion of Texas economy today, and Dallas alone is the second city with most financial professionals employed in the United States. So it's already a major financial hub, no doubt about it. And this Texas Exchange is going to boost the credibility of Texas economy, so benefit from the rise of the Texas economy, while at the same time pushing it up even further.
Watch this space. It's just getting off the ground. Bulent Temel is an associate professor of practice in economics at the University of Texas, San Antonio. Professor, thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, let me tell you about a permit that's designed to help small businesses like dry cleaners and car repair shops get emergency backup power. A new report claims some massive data center projects are using this little permit as a kind of regulatory shortcut. We'll hear how. And we'll also get an update on the World Cup and a whole lot more on tomorrow's edition of the Texas Standard. We're out of time for today's broadcast. Keep up with the news 24/7, texasstandard.org.
Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Wooldridge, Adrian Killam, and the George Huntington family.